Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches time, how to spend time. I'm Andy Green.
I'm Felix Schultz, the hypothetical watch journalist.
Hypothetically, Felix, what would you be if you weren't a watch journalist?
That's a great question. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, something admitted. Maybe I would have never left Bendigo and I'd be like a site manager at a brick factory.
Bendigo Brick Factory.
They do make bricks in Bendigo.
Do they? I could see you as like some sort of manager at like a distillery, like a small batch sort of distillery. It became hot during COVID.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, brewery. I'll be a brewery. I'd be like, have a big beard.
Yeah, rolling the kegs out, tossing them off the truck.
What about you, Andy? What would you do if you were not Andy Green? If you were Andy Red, if you took the red pill?
Took the red pill. Maybe I'd be an actual watch journalist.
I mean, I think you're almost there.
Almost.
Dream hard enough and it shall become true.
I don't know.
So we don't have any guests this week. We've eschewed any sort of watch journalism. After David Concannon, I mean, honestly, where do we go from there? We make up things. That's what we do.
Yeah, it's an inspirational chat. He got us dreaming, daring to dream, daring to think of some crazy ideas. So this episode, what we're going to do is run through some watch industry, watchmaking hypotheticals, just some batshit crazy scenarios and what we think they could be and how we think they'd pan out.
Yeah, a little bit silly, a little bit serious.
It's sort of our recipe, isn't it?
Who's serious, who's silly?
I think I'm serious and you're silly.
Yes, I don't think there's any debate there. Andy, what have you been up to before we dive into the world of crazy shenanigans?
Bit of stuff. Our friend Tony at Rescapement put up a Instagram post that piqued my attention about a week and a half ago. I sent it to you. And it was a bunch of Rolex ring watches, I should say.
Right, so there's like a tiny movement in there, and they
kind of a watch style little movement that had been auctioned from the various last sort of, I think the last 10 years. And it was sort of interesting because I think they had Drake wearing one.
Oh, yeah. Are they the real deal, by the way, or are they like, old Rolex women's watch dials in some sort of...
No, I think they're real. Like, they have Rolex movements.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of fascinating, but they sort of were going for like around 15 grand, 7-8 years ago. And now I think they're probably much more.
Yeah.
Because they are sort of pretty quirky. Some of them have like little covers that you can lift open and reveal a
dial.
The dial. It's a bit murky if they are real. Were they custom orders? Did Rolex kind of make them? Rolex has a lot of odd accessories. Even nowadays, I think you can still get like Rolex golf clubs, for example, as like a customer gift. So they do make weird things. I think they're pretty protective with anything they put a movement in. Whether it's a watch.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's also the sort of thing that if you had a small woman's watch, you could easily get a jeweler to turn that into a ring without too much drama. So I wonder if we'll see a Rescapement newsletter on it.
I mean, could this pop back up? But I think we can probably link up there's a Christie's listing from 2016 that they sort of specifically mention, and they sort of look to be around the 1950s.
All right. Well, you send me a link, Andy, and I'll put it in the show notes.
I will. But extremely rare, extremely odd. What else? Oh, speaking of little things, I watched a Kevin Hart film on Netflix last night. Classic Kevin Hart. He one of those actors who's just made a huge amount of success playing himself, which, if the people like you, play yourself. But it's a film called The Man from Toronto.
Sure.
With Woody Harrelson.
Yep.
Surprisingly good duo. Really enjoyable.
They've got similar energy.
Do they?
Well, complementary energy.
Complementary. Yeah, really complementary, I would say. I don't know about similar, but...
What is The Man from Toronto about in 25 words or less and one cinematic comparison?
Kevin Hart gets mistaken for a hitman from Toronto.
Nice.
And then they sort of become rivals and then best friends.
Is Woody Harrelson the actual hitman from Toronto?
He's the hitman from Toronto.
Natch. Well, I mean, it just writes itself.
Yeah, and 2 hours later. No, it's pretty enjoyable. There's some genuine laughing out loud. So I would say check it out for a Friday night with a pizza or something.
So keeping it cinematic, something that I've been sort of in a weird way watching on and off for like the last week or so, and I've been sending you random WhatsApp messages trying to convince you to get on it. I think it's the greatest work of collaborative cinema that has potentially ever been made.
Wow.
But certainly that has been made during lockdown.
Okay, why? What is
Well,
it?
you know how in the early days of lockdowns, there were all those sort of pretty cringy celebrity, let's heal the world through the power
Yeah,
of celebrity
songs and
vibes.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This is actually good. So a bunch of very famous people have got together and remade The Princess Bride, which is already one of the greatest movies ever made.
Uh-huh.
And they've basically broken up the script and shot it on iPhone, so it's in like iPhone format. It's very like low budget, like there'll be sword fights
Yeah.
involving I don't know lightsabers and bad edits to sometimes a dog is a co-star. But I'm just going to go through the cast list of this work. Javier Bardem,
Yep.
Hugh Jackman, Bryan Cranston, Seth Rogen, Dave Bautista, Jack Black, Patton Oswalt, Tiffany Haddish, Shaquille O'Neal, Beanie Feldstein, Adam Sandler, Sophie Turner, Pedro Pascal, Chris Pine, Finn Wolfhard, Taika Waititi, Jennifer Garner, Sam Rockwell. That's just some of them.
Well, I mean, Sam Rockwell versus Chris Pine. Who wins in a fight?
Depends who's playing Inigo Montoya and who's playing the guy with 6 fingers. Paul Rudd, and like a lot of the
Collector.
sorry.
Fred Savage, big watch collector.
Yeah, a lot of the original cast is in there.
Mm.
Carl Reiner and Rob Reiner.
The cast from The Office. Rainn Wilson,
Yeah,
Oscar
yeah.
Nunez.
Yeah, it's huge. And there's lots of very cute interactions. Like obviously, Joe Jonas and Sophie Turner, who I believe are married, they sort of act together, and there's some really special stuff. Like it's obviously a movie that these people really love. Like, and you see like Dave Bautista playing the role of Fezzik that was played by Andre the Giant, who's also a wrestler. It's just great, and it's really worth a watch. It's on YouTube. I don't think it's like a legit upload because I think the other weird thing, it was done for like I think a streaming service that no longer exists anymore. So it was it was probably like the Clubhouse for video or something that was hot for 3 minutes. But yeah, really, really great. Recommend it. Very funny. Do you know what else I've been doing, Andy? This is watch related and a bit weird.
Tell me.
I've been having fun with a Huawei watch.
A Huawei?
Huawei, the technology brand.
Wow. So it's not a. Is this a hypothetical? Or is this real life?
It's a real thing. I got it's a smartwatch. I got a random PR email, and I'm like, sure, yeah. I've got a really good familiarity with Apple watches. I'm pretty across a whole bunch of Wear OS Android watches, but I've never tried one of these.
You're an Android user, we should say, for your phone.
Yeah. The interesting thing, though, this is the main thing. So I ended up, responded to this PR thing. Ended up, a couple of weeks later with the new Watch Fit 2. Which is a smartwatch. There's some interesting things about it. Now, Huawei being Huawei, they are not officially endorsed via either Apple or Google Play Store.
Okay.
So you do have to kind of do some third-party side loading. And potentially, voiding some security things. Like you get the scary message saying, "Do you sure you want to do this? We don't guarantee this download," because there's been some issues there in the past. But I'm okay with all that, to be honest. And the watch is really, it's an interesting proposition in several ways. So this is sort of their mid-tier watch. It's new. It's 26 grams off the strap. So I don't know what, like maybe 30 something on the strap. It's cost about $300, which
significantly cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah. 32 gig hard drive. It's, GPS, I think eSIM supported, all that stuff. It's a pretty solid product, but the main kicker for me is they're quoting 7 to 10 days of battery life.
Wow. My watch lasts like 24 hours.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so what's your Apple Watch through like regular use, like just, living your day-to-day life, not going particularly hard on it? What do you get out of it?
Probably like 30 hours, if I'm honest.
Yeah, okay. So I've been wearing this pretty consistently since Friday, and I think I charged it up to about 70% on Friday, and it is currently at, hang on, let me just...
Do you have your notifications coming through?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I think that drains, like the vibration probably drains a fair bit of battery.
Yeah, and I'm doing like, it sort of says, like I had a press briefing, they say, you can have like 30 minutes of talk,
Okay.
200 checking of the time, active screen things,
Oh, yeah.
regular 60 text messages. I don't know, all these, like they specify what average use is, and that's what they're saying. And it didn't seem like ridiculous. So yeah, Friday was at 70%. It's now at 44%.
Okay, solid. And what are you like? Are you enjoying wearing it?
I kind of am. And see, the thing for me is like I'm enjoying it as much as I wear any smartwatch. And I
Yep.
will take a brief side note. There are two other ones that I think are also quite interesting that they've released. There's one called the GT3 they've done, which is sort of their high end,
Mhm.
more fashiony sort of watch. Titanium and ceramic versions. The titanium one, it's kind of got like a monoblock, like 70s Zenith Defy Tudor Ranger sort of
Oh, yeah,
case.
cool.
I know Tudor North Flag, that sort of blocky, like it actually looks like it resembles a real watch in some interesting ways. And that one boasts 14 days of battery,
Oh, yeah.
which is pretty wild. And then there's one that's also quite interesting called the Watch D that has actually integrated a blood pressure
Oh, that's
uh,
handy.
reader into the wrist, like into the strap.
Mhm.
So there's this little tiny pump that you can take out and like a rubber sort of inflatable tube inside the strap that can apparently get a fairly decent reading on your blood pressure. Not like TGA approved, but apparently
Got it.
as accurate. Um, so it's interesting. Like this, it's a sort of different way of doing things in some ways, and it's a little less. Like, honestly, all the Android ones to me are pretty cookie cutter vanilla experience. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Mont Blanc, Samsung, or whatever else it is. It feels the same. This feels different. The OS is it's very familiar. Let me put it
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
You would be pretty comfortable with it. Everything's essentially the same. There's some weird kind of you know uh, experiences and animations and stuff that's kind of quirky and endearing. But I think the thing that I find most interesting about it is I would wear this primarily for like exercise, fitness,
Well,
and tracking my steps, all that sort of stuff.
sure.
In the past, I've fallen off the smartwatch wagon because I'd take it off, I'd put on another watch, I'd go to put the smartwatch back on, and it would have run out of battery.
Ah, yeah, you gotta charge.
Yeah. Whereas this, I reckon I could leave it off for 3 days and I'd still be fine.
Mm.
So, like, if I'm just wearing it for like workouts or that sort of stuff, it's not going to have that issue for me because I don't always remember to put it back on the charging you know,
Yeah,
s- pad or stand. Plus, I think it's definitely not for everyone, and I think there will be people that don't like the fact that you've got to go through some, you've got to scan a QR code to get the download and all that sort of stuff.
painful.
There's that lack of security that comes through the big Apples, and Android stores. But it's interesting.
There you go.
Yeah, but it's not the only watch I've been talking about.
No, we met up earlier in the week. I had a little package to give you, something from our
Mm.
friends who also happen to be sponsoring this week's episode of OT the podcast, and that is, of course, Nomos Glasute.
Yes, thank you, Nomos. You have recently released. I'm talking to Nomos as if they're listening to this, which I'm sure they will.
Definitely are.
So Nomos have given us a fairly significant upgrade of the Ahoi Atlantic. Now,
Uh-huh.
the Ahoi Atlantic, the Ahoi was first released in 2013, I believe, maybe 2014. And it's their sort of sports watch. It's 200 meters water resistance. It's got a crown protector. It's pretty robust, but it's not a dive watch. There's no bezel, and it's still very Nomos in its look
Mm.
and feel. Now, this upgrade, we've got a new Neomatic version that's 37 millimeters, and there's a date version, but we're looking at the regular time only reference 547/557. Comes in at 5,500 Australian dollars, and the biggest change we're talking about is the dial.
Yep.
So the Atlantic refers to the color, which is sort of a really dark blue. And I've posted here, Andy, you can see a little side-by-side picture of
Yes.
the watch I own, which is the old model at Hoy Atlantic, and the new one. And I think you will agree that the dial difference is pretty stark.
So, is the dial the only difference?
Yes. So the case is the same, dimensions are the same, caliber's the same. Dial is not.
Dial's a little bit more, I mean, obviously it's a different color, but there's a little bit more vibrance in it, I think.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've always, and I remember, giving the Nomos PR team a little bit of shtick is about they call it a blue, and the original Atlantic blue wasn't a particularly blue. It's sort of like a very grey, slaty sort of color almost. This new one does look, it's a lot richer and it's a lot
Yeah.
brighter.
Different finish to it, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's got to do with the AR coding, perhaps.
Oh, possibly,
which affects sort of how you see it. The other major change is the numerals, which sort of have that familiar tangente layout and typeface. In the original version, they were sort of a beige, creamy color. Now they are white.
It's a bit of legibility.
In addition to that, the numerals are also luminous now.
Yes.
And there's some other small changes around the hour markers in the old one were sort of black with a beige surround. Now they're beige lume with a really interesting bright green surround that you might not have noticed if you weren't looking at it under a loop. And another change, so the hands are also, this sort of brighter luminous material. So, and the other interesting difference, Andy, and this is the one I think I really prefer the old version to the new. On the old version, the small second hands were sort of like a fluoro orange.
Yes.
This time around, it's like a classic red, which does match that the new blue of the dial better.
I like it. So it's quite a significant slew of updates. What do you love about your Nomos Ahoi? I mean, in a more general sense, obviously, you have it, it's been upgraded, but you can still, I guess, speak to the ownership experience quite nicely.
It's a really look. I mean, there's that sort of trope of a do anything watch is sort of overplayed sometimes, but this is like you get that Nomos feel, you get that sort of quirky design and that sort of bit of sense of personality in a watch that you don't have to worry about. And not that you have to worry about a club or anything else, but this one, it's expressly built, for getting wet and for sort of being knocked around a little bit.
Quite a bit more sporty.
It's what you like with any sports watch with that sort of Nomos feel, and it doesn't feel like if you're wearing a suit or you're wearing something a little bit more formal or whatever your sort of style is, maybe you don't want to wear a full-on dive watch. This is a good middle ground, I think.
Sure. Well, where can we learn more about these this lovely
the website, I would suggest, is probably the first place to go. We'll obviously link it up in the show notes, but nomos-glasuta.com. Also, you can check them out in person in Australia at Monards The Hourglass. And I think just, get the vibe, get that Nomos energy. Yeah, go try it on. And the other thing, Andy, this one might be interesting for you. The Neomatic one is a bit slimmer, but it's also smaller at 37 millimeters across.
Oh, that is interesting. I like that. Good proportions. Very nice. Well, thank you, Nomos Glasuta, for sponsoring today's episode of OT Podcast. Guys, support us by supporting our sponsors. Speaking of support, sponsors, and a brand that will never sponsor us. This is the first hypothetical. So, Felix, an idea you had recently was, let's just talk about crazy hypotheticals. They could be spawned from watch, industry rumors or release rumors.
They sort of come up when we chat. It's like, you get bored, and when you're talking to other watch people, it's like, oh, what do you think? Do you think Patek would ever make a red dial Nautilus? And, you talk about that stuff. So we're, turning it into content.
I love it. So the first one we said was, a couple on Rolex, because it's a big brand. It's such a secretive brand, so you can kind of speculate, and it's basically all people do. Speculate and throw around hypotheticals. So, question to you, Felix: what would happen if Rolex doubled their production in 5 years? Could it be possible, and what would it mean?
Let's talk about the first part of this, and I'll be interested in your take on this because I assume, because you're more sensible than I am, you have a deep understanding of watch manufacturing layout and strategy. I reckon if they decided to start running their factory 24 hours a day, they could add a fair bit of volume.
Yes, but it's not that simple.
They're already doing 7 days a week, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they were during the pandemic, I believe, kind of pick back up and try and catch up on production. But, machines and certain things and pieces of equipment do need maintenance. Okay. So, the more you use it, if you do twice the use, then your servicing and maintenance intervals are going to be, twice as frequent.
Okay. I mean, also, let's say a Rolex could, I'm assuming, afford to
It'd be
build
expansion.
to double their size in physical.
I would say they have absolutely everything optimized. Like they would have the numbers
Mm,
of what is the most amount, this machine can produce and this person can produce without, in conjunction with things like servicing, maintenance,
yeah.
downtime, and they run their machines to the optimal capacity. Like they're not a joke of a business whatsoever. So they would have this stuff down to a T. So any expansion in production, I like to believe, would come from expanding their facilities, and that is, of course, that takes some years to build. You also have, around the world, huge problems with labor and
Yep.
getting people to do it, especially in some parts of Europe. Just kind of getting
And it's skilled labor. I mean, like it's
skilled labor in. Materials are pretty expensive. Building anything is pretty scary at the moment. So in the current environment, I don't think they could. What they could do is reallocate production and focus on, just make Daytonas, and you could probably make, 1 million Daytonas in a year. So
but what if they did? What if they decided this is sort of going slightly off track? One way that Rolex could quickly scale up their production facilities is just get rid of Tudor.
now there you go. They could.
Maybe. What would that mean? So let's say, I mean, they've got, I assume, endless money. Let's say they've made it happen. They've done all the things they have to do. They've doubled their production. What would that mean for the world?
Well, prices would come down. I don't think it would be as drastic as what would make people would be scared of. Resale prices would obviously come down because there's more supply, but I think Rolex would probably need to 10x or 20x their production to meet
Demand.
at the moment.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to increase production a little bit because you obviously demand is good and it's great for future business. Getting rid of Tudor would be pretty interesting, right? Because Tudor has the Black Bay, which is the star of that brand, and then there would be a lot of production going towards those models that no one really buys or cares about.
Yeah, because they'd have to have like a whole dedicated. They'd still have a line somewhere in the factory for the Tudor Advisor.
Yeah, the Advisor, the Glamour, the
style and
those models we can't remember.
Yep.
So you could get
also,
rid of.
I mean, to what extent are all those made by Tudor in their own building? Because that's the other way Rolex could do it. They could outsource production.
Yes, well, I mean, they could move production overseas.
Or well, no, they could even just rent a factory in some other part of Switzerland.
Yeah.
Like that exists.
I think Rolex does what Rolex does, but what if they introduced a tourbillon?
I have no doubt that Rolex has made tourbillons.
You think?
Surely they have at some point in their, almost 100 years, over 100 years of history, they have experimented with it as a.
They'd have a patent for it, surely. They'd probably be able to check the patent register, see if they've ever put a patent on a tourbillon.
Well, I mean, like even Omega, I sort of think they made some in the 40s. There is no way they haven't tried it just to sort of say, oh, maybe this will create more accuracy. Maybe this will be.
I think Omega still have tourbillons.
Yeah, 100%. But like early on, they made they did the first in a wristwatch. Maybe
Center tourbillon, I think.
Yeah, they've still got the center tourbillon. I don't know, man. Why would Rolex make a tourbillon? That's the profit margin.
All those Bali specials would suddenly pop back up on eBay. What about? I like this idea. I like this is one that I love. They do. They re-release the Rolex Oyster Quartz Day-Date.
Yeah, mate, I'd love that for that.
How good would that be?
Can you imagine the hype around that?
Yeah, the price point, 30 grand, 40 grand. It'd probably have to be like 40 grand still. Oyster Quartz movement, 10-year service interval because they've updated the tech.
Yeah, that's a very it's a very Grand Seiko move. Like let's honor this historic model by making a replica of it that's better.
Yeah, because it's cool. The vintage models are very cool. It's obviously it's not a direction that Rolex really went too far down during the quartz crisis, but they did sell some. How do you pay homage to that,
I think that they would have to do it. The only way I can see them doing it is if they developed something new. Like if they developed like a
Oyster Quartz.
new type of quartz oscillator, or
Yes.
some sort of even more precise and accurate
Rolly
technology.
Quartz. It'd be called Rolly
Oh, jeez,
Quartz.
it would be
It's proprietary quartz.
made from quartz rolesium crystals. Jeez.
Yeah. Found somewhere in the.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that's none of these are likely, to be honest, with Rolex.
No.
But it's fun to speculate.
What about John Mayer becoming a ambassador or testimony?
Oh, this one.
Because he sort of, single-handedly exploded the a couple of Daytona models, which I'm sure has given authorized dealers around the world a world of headaches. Do you think they could put that behind them and have him as a friend of the brand?
Well, I'm sure he's a friend of the brand.
You think he's a friend?
I think that would be friendly. I mean, he's probably got a great relationship with his dealer. Does Rolex do much in the way of like
Musicians? They have Michael Bublé.
celebrities?
Yeah.
They've got Bublé, I
They got
guess.
Bublé.
Because they've gone really hard into like sports.
They have a
Well,
lot
I
of
guess they've
sports.
always been into it, but
They have adventurers still, David
yeah,
Smith's got the Explorers Club.
he's not clean cut enough.
You don't think he's clean cut enough?
I guess. I mean, they stuck with Tiger Woods though, so
Yeah, fascinating. That's not a hypothetical. They did.
I just think they didn't do any PR for 5 years.
One thing I get asked a lot from people sort of on the peripherals of watches is, do I think that Rolex prices are going to, obviously the aftermarket softened for a lot of things, especially Rolex down quite a bit.
Yeah.
Do I think they're going to go back to normal? Do I think that a watch will be retail on the secondhand market or even less than retail? And I always say, well, it's happened before. I remember, my first Rolex was cheaper and it was a Submariner. It was cheaper pre-owned than new.
Yes. That was normal for
that wasn't that long ago.
The majority of the company's history.
I like to think I'm a pretty young guy, and that was not that long ago.
I think so. I think it'll return to normal.
You think there'll be a time when sort of
adjusted for inflation,
you pay a couple of grand extra for a sports model?
I mean, I guess that depends on Rolex becoming less cool.
Yeah.
And there's a hypothetical. Will Rolex will go out of style?
I think, well, that's a good question, Felix. And speaking of things that are going out of style, I want to tell you about something that's coming into style.
Where are we going with this, Andy?
We're talking about a message I received during the week, a little Instagram DM.
Someone slid in.
Here's a tracking number. I got a parcel coming your way. Who could it be? Of course, it's Artem.Straps in my inbox. He's been supporting OT the podcast this entire year. And what I like is they just say there's someone coming. They don't tell me what it is. They don't tell you what it is. And then whoever gets it first sends the other a WhatsApp message with an image of it.
Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they just don't want to talk about it in writing. Maybe it's like something
top secret,
so secret, or potentially, breaching the laws of our nation. They don't want to, commit it to surveillance.
Well, our friends at Artem Straps did kind of tease and show that they've got a grey NATO finally coming, which is going to be the utmost quality that you could possibly hope for.
Yep.
But you suggested we talked about what about an Artem Straps hypothetical, Felix? So what do you see this young up and coming business from Australia doing?
Honestly, we've been talking about Artem hypotheticals for the last month or so with our dream of the pink NATO, but I think what could be this would be in a way plausible because Artem are that sort of company that would commit to this, an online strap designing customizable tool.
Yeah.
Where you can make your own. You can say, I want curved lugs, 22 millimeters. I want the strap, the loopless thinness. I want this. I want that. I want this. I want that. All so you can build your own strap.
Sure.
Might not be the cheapest product to make.
It'll be the most fun.
Yeah. Would you imagine something like this happening, Andy?
Yeah, I mean it's even odds with them making a pink NATO strap, but maybe they'll make me a strap unique.
Ooh, love it. Let's get on it.
You know what I need to put it on artemstraps.com.
Artem.straps on Instagram. Check them out. Hassle them. Ask when the customizer is coming online.
I love it. Hey, speaking of hassling things, you know who gets hassled a lot?
I don't know.
Patek dealers. Imagine if Patek Philippe only made the 5711.
Yeah, their profit margins will go down.
You think they? Oh yeah, they'd have to start making bracelets for their watches.
Yeah, and I guess they. I mean, are we talking all 5711s only steel? Yeah, so no precious metals.
No, they can do precious metals.
Okay, all right. Okay, okay,
Some
okay.
fat margins in there.
Yeah, okay, all right. Cool, cool, cool. They'll be all
You know,
right. They'll be all
what
right.
about their watchmaking heritage? What about the Calatrava? They'll be fine. They'll probably
What
make more
about the
money.
clocks? Make more clocks.
Clock,
I
gorgeous.
think the more interesting hypothetical one we've touched before, and I think there's
Yes,
sort of been the occasional
rumors.
gossip
Yeah,
mongering rumor about this. Patek Philippe gets sold.
yeah. And here's the thing, right? Apparently, Terry's, divorced, and there is that. That's something that's what stems the rumors. Is he got divorced a few years ago, and people think he's going to have to sell the business or whatever to,
Or his ex-wife would, just own a big chunk of the company.
either or.
Not
What
the
happens?
worst,
We don't know,
you know?
but that's where a lot of these rumors come from. That.
Yep.
So Patek Philippe gets sold. Who could afford to buy Patek Philippe? That's my first question, because they are
Mm.
they don't make the most volume of watches, but they make some of the most money in watches. They're probably a couple of $1 billion company.
Yeah, and they've recently invested in a big new infrastructure.
Yeah,
Look, the obvious one is, and I think the one that sort of we've talked about and has been touted a lot is the LVMH group.
probably the only
Uh,
people that could buy it, honestly, outside of a private individual from the Middle East, maybe.
well, no, because I had another hypothetical, a bit more silly one.
Mm.
You know who else is exactly the right sort of person to buy into 5711 hype? And I think if this person got behind purchasing Patek Philippe, would convert them to an only 5711 manufacturer,
Yeah.
Elon Musk.
Oh my god, could you imagine if he just tweeted saying, "I'm going to buy Patek Philippe"? What would happen to
Oh,
the Nautilus?
he's a grifter.
What would you
He's
rather, buy Twitter or buy Patek Philippe? The power to
what's
allocate.
worth more?
I mean, I think over
Oh,
the next 100 years, Patek's going to be a better
yeah, yeah. I
investment.
was about to say, I mean, which one's been around for more than a decade?
So my thing is, you can sell the most desirable, one of the most desirable watches in the planet to probably the most influential people on the planet,
Yeah.
based off customers and who actually buys Patek and has that sort of money and who wants this stuff.
Have you
Or you
seen?
can kind of control the internet.
Have you seen all that stuff about? I'm sure you have, about the terrible quality of Tesla construction.
Yeah, it's not looking great. Where's my Cybertruck at?
Well, yeah, and all the this is what happens when a tech company makes a car. Imagine what happens if a tech company made a watch.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
all those jangly bracelets and 18 millimeter straps on 20 millimeter lugs. That's what that'll be the new normal, and they'd be sold as features.
oh god,
I've got another one on that vein, and this was a very late night hypothetical that I had. What if the largest watch company in the world starts making mechanical watches?
what if the largest watchmaker,
I'm talking about Apple, Andy.
Apple, starts making a mechanical watch?
What if Apple goes, all
Didn't
right?
they? Didn't they already? Isn't it called the iPod?
Oh no, that's Mark Newson, who's a separate entity. But sure, I see what you did
Well, you
there.
see what I'm saying? It would probably look like that.
Maybe. I mean, but can you imagine, like, if they
Yeah.
just either that or they use their same architecture and style of the Apple Watch, but popped a square movement in
They
it.
would have insane margins that the watchmaking industry has never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, they just call up is it Foxconn, the factories in China.
Robert, you know what it would be? It would probably just be like a higher end swatch, if we're honest with ourselves.
Yeah, that would terrify the Swiss.
Yeah, yeah.
And related to that, this is another one I don't think this is implausible at all.
Speaking of terrifying the Swiss,
Yeah, China gets serious about making watches and starts, not that they're not serious already, but they're doing it in volume. If they start matching the Swiss and the Japanese for quality,
yeah, I mean,
it'll
basically,
it'll
a
happen.
micro brand gets their stuff made in China
Yeah.
before they get enough, money to move to Japan or Switzerland,
Mm.
and that's where all the machining is done. So yeah, I mean, there's got
And
to be a couple of like luxury Chinese watch brands, right?
I think not so many. I mean, the only one I can think of is Atelier Wen.
Mm.
But I mean, even like you look at the improvement in cases in that micro brand scene, I think that's a really good
Yeah.
example. They started out being pretty blocky, hockey pucks, and now they're great.
I find that actually an interesting point. Why they're not, you know, why is there not a really nice luxury watch brand from China
The
to cater
Swiss,
to the Chinese market?
the Swiss own it. The Swiss, it's that.
Mm. They have that
Uh,
dominance, don't they?
yeah, like that's I think the aspirational side of it. But that'll change. I think there'll be, there's probably an emerging. It's probably already happening, and we're just not, plugged into it. There are people probably Chinese people out there that are like, yeah, let's make it happen. I've got a factory. I really like
Yeah.
watches. I want to promote,
Yeah, because
Chinese
they
watchmaking.
do amazing manufacturing. So that's an interesting point. Something a little bit closer to home.
Mhm.
What if they found Buzz Aldrin's missing Speedmaster?
This is one of my favorite stories. This is one of
Mhm.
my favorite missing watches.
Conspiracies.
Yeah, so he, I believe, got home from the moon, had a weekend off, and returned all his stuff to the Smithsonian or NASA. So he was meant to send stuff off, and he just popped his watch in the post, and it never arrived at the Smithsonian.
Did he use Ozpost?
What are the libel laws or defamation laws like in Australia, Andy?
No, Ozpost, not good.
They'll arrive in 15 to 20 years. So no, it just didn't. USPS, I assume. And I reckon, I think they have a fairly good idea of what the serial number would have been. Like they've
Yes.
narrowed it down. There's definitely some alerts out there. Like, hey, if
I
you're
wonder
servicing
I
this
wonder if
watch,
whoever pinched it knows what they have.
it might not have been pinched.
I wonder if who has it knows what they have.
I mean, the only way I was thinking about this again, I couldn't sleep last night. I was thinking about it too much. The
Yeah.
only way it gets found, I think, is if it was pinched and someone knows, and then, by now, I'm assuming the granddaughter or grandson of the person that pinched it feels bad and says, look, takes it to Antiques Roadshow and says, there's a story in my family that, my dad pinched this watch that, belonged to an astronaut.
Because it's still NASA property, right? So NASA would own it.
Yeah, the government, the
So
American
you don't get
government.
to keep it. That's the thing. It's probably very valuable,
Mhm.
but you wouldn't get to keep it.
Mhm.
So maybe if we did like an amnesty thing where it was like you get to keep it, but just come forward.
Yeah, and I reckon certainly Amiga has put out a bounty on it. You know what I mean? Like they'll
What do you reckon the bounty
they'll
is?
have I don't know. It's a
100K?
coconut flavored chocolate bar.
500K? Watch bounties.
Trip to the moon.
Trip to the moon. A watch bounty.
Yeah,
I love it.
you know who could find it? Elon Musk. Do a tweet.
You know where this bounty should be publicized. Hodinky. Felix, imagine if Hodinky became a watch brand.
That's not too implausible, I don't think.
Do you reckon they've done? I mean, it's all collabs. They're very good at bringing a level of excitement and spice to existing watches, and
Mm.
they're the best collaborators in watches by
They could
far.
make the Apple Watch.
What would happen if Hodinky did a Hodinky watch?
My first question is, what would it look like?
Yeah, I think I would have a really hard time finding style.
It depends when they did it as well.
Yeah,
Like, depends if Ben Clymer's still involved. I think it'd have a particular feel.
look and feel to it. Yeah,
I don't know. I don't see why they would do it. I think it would confuse things too much, but it'd kind of be cool unless they bought a manufacturer for some sort of tax reasons, or like their investors decide they needed to park some.
that's the thing, right? They already do put Hodinky on the dial. They've done it on plenty of things. They got Hodinky on the strap, Hodinky on the dial. All it would
Oh, I
be
don't think they
doing,
have done Hodinky on the dial of their own limited editions.
I think they have surely.
The Tudor that was like the friends and family one had Hodinky on the dial.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
They've had them on the back of other stuff. I don't think they've put it on the dial before.
Someone will correct us.
Hmm.
There you go. Speaking of things that young hip kids watch, imagine if TikTok
You
made
mean
dress watches cool again.
I've sent you this? You know I'm a large fan of TikTok, and I
Yeah.
believe I've helped convert you to the social media platform.
Yes, you did. It's all your fault.
Thank you. There's a guy on there that I sort of see a fair bit now because I've engaged with their content. And he's like a young style guy who's into watches, and he does like a lot of watch TikToks. It's terrible. his level of knowledge is not good. And I'm not one to shoot down the young people, but
Yeah.
he needs
And back.
to learn a little bit more about watches and stop being so hot takey. But I can see where you're coming from if they make dress watches cool again, because
Yeah.
honestly, with where Cartier is these days,
Yeah.
we're almost there.
So what if sports watches went out of style and everyone wanted dressy watches, something on a leather strap, or the Datejust? The Datejust was more popular than the Submariner, and
I'm
everyone
buying
just wants dressies.
I'm buying Cellinis now.
Cellinis are not a common watch.
Mm-hmm.
I designed a little bit, but they're not a common watch. Here's a question, Felix.
Yeah.
Not a hypothetical question. Where I'm at watches, you've obviously been around, quite a bit longer than I have. But with your appreciation and sort of where you are in your watch, the watch journey,
My watch
this world's
journey.
taken on.
Yeah.
Would you buy a Cellini now? Would that be a contender for a watch for you?
Are we talking in real money? Like, would I buy a Cellini with my own money?
Say
Market
8 years
rate?
ago, you saw a Cellini. It was $8,000 in a Chrono 24 back when everything was cheaper than retail, and you had $8,000 to spend. Would you have wished that you bought it?
I think I've got quite a soft spot for the square ones with the precious metal movements.
Yeah.
They're cool. They're undeniable. Like and I think again, this is not hypothetical. This is just what I think. It's one of the last times that Rolex design was not safe. Like there was a real personality and brand identity there that was like more than this is just a Rolex. Like it was not just an Oyster case. Had that real sort of deco vibe and
Yeah.
I love a good Cellini. Less so the new round ones.
Yeah, a little bit big, but it's kind of a flex. It's kind of a flexy watch.
Yeah, and we've got a mutual friend who has a beautiful collection of like Rolex Princes and very impressive things. So yeah, I could do it.
Another topic that's super relevant for you. Frank Mueller becomes hot again. Don't laugh.
Look, we talk about hypotheticals. We don't talk about impossibilities.
Yeah. You imagine if Frank Mueller became Richard Mille and just became the hot. Everyone wanted Frank Mueller.
I think I'm thinking about this seriously. It could happen.
Yeah, it actually could.
Except for the structural stuff, it would have to be the brand would have to be sold, I think, and they would have to redo it.
Do a bit of housekeeping. What collab would make what? I'm not talking about that. They did the Esham one, which was like 30 pieces or less. That's too small. What collab at like 500 pieces would they have to do to sell out?
Tiffany,
Frank Mueller, Tiffany, 500 pieces.
Maybe even cooler. Banksy,
I think you need something really cool. Banksy.
Imagine
Banksy could be cool. They've got the dial for it. And
I think the thing with Frank Mueller is you could, like, the bones are there. Like Frank Mueller has got the credibility, and there's that clear brand identity. Maybe I'm talking myself around to Frank Mueller becoming hot. Let's buy up all those Curvexes. I've got a hypothetical for you.
Yep.
You decide not to do the safe thing and buy another Rolex. You decide to go, look, I've only been buying Rolex because, I'm part of the herd, the crowd. I want to go the safe choice. I want to be validated by the cool kids. I want to buy what I've really secretly loved all along. I'm going to buy a Girard-Perregaux Seahawk 2.
The Seahawk 2 specifically. And then subsequently cut my wrist off.
I mean...
Never to wear a watch again.
I mean, there's still ankles, Andy. The Seahawk.
Nub.
Because it's a dive watch, it's probably got a wetsuit strap. You could easily fit that around your ankle.
What about this? Hypothetically, you can make the GP Seahawk 2 better looking.
Look, it's a beautiful watch. It's got a really distinct design language. It's. I'm thinking you could probably go to a creative agency like to come up with a way to rehabilitate it. Like all you need is a tagline like one for the dreamers or something like that. Do you think this is perhaps the most plausible hypothetical, and perhaps one of the last hypotheticals we're going to talk about today?
Yeah.
The Seahawk becomes a sub.
And then Andy gets out of watches.
Done. Is this the last episode of OT, the podcast?
This is it. This is the final. But in case it's not, Make sure you're telling your friends and family about OT the podcast. Make sure you support our sponsors, which are, of course, Nomosko Sute this week, and our friends at Artem Straps. If you need to accessorize your new Nomos, Felix, how do people get in touch with ourselves?
Yeah, look, first of all, I think we should apologise to Gerard Perregaux.
And Frank Mueller, and just about every watch brand and affiliate we've offended today.
But perhaps the person that signed off on the Seahawk needs to apologise to us as well.
And the community in general. Maybe sort of run some legislated PSAs or something.
I don't hate it. But if you are particularly angry and aggrieved at some of our takes, or if you have your own conspiracy theories, we should do that next. Conspiracy theories.
Oh, yes.
OTthepodcast@gmail.com, OT.podcast on Instagram.
We'll see you guys next week. We'll be back with something interesting to have a chat with.
Yeah, the brand president of Gerard Perregaux talking about the Seahawk 3.
Block out 3 hours for that one. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.